up, sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen, on a Thursday night here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Wherever and however you may be watching and listening, thanks for making us part of your day. I'm excited because tonight we got the Shrine Bowl. Jay's joining us. We got some futures amongst us that we really got. Like, look, this is where I got to go and I got to get, there's a book out that makes you, it actually educates you on like play design, all the rest of it. But we'll have a special guest at some point coming up soon. And there's a book that he actually has that has to deal with the recruitment processes and when it comes to signing days. I'm excited about this one because I think it's important for a lot of coaches all around across the country to really kind of understand that. You want to get better at coaching. You want to get better at least recruiting these players, especially in the high school level. It's an incredible book. I cannot wait to have the author on this show. It'll be fantastic. But how are we feeling about the Shrine Bowl, man? I'm excited about this one tonight.
Dude, I'm excited to, like, once we get done with the show, I'm going to go and watch it and see how everything is. And then with the Senior Bowl on Saturday and everything, it's going to be even better.
I'll tell you what, man, because like I said, last year, we did our top 10 draftees on the show, and we nailed a lot of them this past season. So I'm excited.
I'm good to start it. I'm going to do it right now if you want.
Yeah, right. Hey, there you go. Well, I do want to backtrack because I do want to end up talking about something from here. So early on, I thought this was actually a pretty good hire for the New York Jets, and not only just for Aaron Glenn, but there were sources that have reported that the New York Jets, their new defensive coordinator is Steve Wilks. I know a ton of people kind of have a little bit of mixed emotions about Steve Wilks, but let me just kind of nail it in the butt from here. Steve Wilks, much like a couple coaches that kind of come to mind, like Hugh Jackson, several other coaches, they get put in a situation. You watched in Arizona, you watched at the time when he was up in Carolina, and you watched at the time when he was with San Francisco as a defensive coordinator there. And the controversial part of it, when they talked about the Super Bowl, people were like, Steve Wilks, what is he doing on defense? What is he doing on all this? The true reason that the San Francisco 49ers, when they lost that Super Bowl, the defense was on the field the entirety of the time. They couldn't get the offense to stay on the field. They could not win the time of possession battle. That's what you're supposed to do in a Super Bowl. And what the crazy part was is that they did not trust and rely on giving the ball to Christian McCaffrey. Go and get yourself some hard runs. Go and then put up together some bootlegs to get first downs. That's the whole point of Kyle Shanahan's smart play calling scheme. And yet Steve Wilks apparently was a scapegoat in this whole thing. That's why he got fired. But Steve Wilks, this is a chance of revival for the New York Jets. It's a perfect opportunity because Robert Saleh, when he was with the Jets and he shaped up this defense with Sauce Gardner and a bunch of other players, the defense was great. And the funny thing is like that sideline, when you watch them play, it looked like a college sideline. Players were invested, and they had a very good defense. Sauce Gardner was, he was working on man-to-man. He was working on zone coverages, and then you got DJ Reed. who arguably is going to be a hot commodity in the free agent market. They have a ton of really good corners, and they've also got a very, very good edge rush group, front line, linebacking core that I like, which is why I said when Saleh got fired and when Aaron Rodgers was kind of doing what Aaron does best, I mean, it tore this team apart. What was trending to go into the positive direction, it was going the opposite again. And the Jets ran out of jet fuel. No pun intended. But the fact of the matter is, they come to this point, and the question mark is this, is what does Aaron Glenn do about Aaron Rodgers? Do you bring him back or do you let him go? That is the question mark right now for the New York Jets. But the surefire thing is that I think Steve Wilks, this is an opportunity of redemption because everybody pretty much badmouthed about his play scheme, play calling, whatever it was, when they lost the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. And how easy of a task is it to beat the Chiefs? It's really not. That's why with Philadelphia representing in here Super Bowl weekend, they got arguably the best talent. They've got a very good defensive front line I like. I love their corners. And they've also got a rock star running back in Saquon Barkley. They got all the talent in the world. But you still got to be able to beat the champs and that are trying to go for a three-peat. So, but with Steve Wilks, I think he could definitely manage up this roster. And I think that he could truthfully make the defense a lot better than what last year was. Because before Saleh got fired, the defense was fine. After Saleh got fired, all the numbers went down. Oh, and by the way, Jeff Ulbrich, he ended up getting another defensive coordinating job. Good for him. I thought Ulbrich worked hand in hand with Robert Saleh. So with Aaron Glenn here, a defensive coach who is working more towards being a culture-setting coach, I don't blame him for that. But then bring in a Steve Wilks who is trying to redeem himself after all the narratives were all the outs on him. So I think this works. I think this is one that Aaron Glenn is very much a guy who's great to work with. He's absolutely the juice in the locker room that these players need. So when you add in somebody like Steve Wilks, who's ultimately going to complement exactly what you're trying to do up on defense, I think this works. And like I told everybody, I would hate to see this Jets defense be taken for granted. Ultimately, yeah, they lost. But most of that is because there's so much dysfunction in this organization. This is why you needed to get it consistent and you needed to get it right. So I feel like the defensive side of the ball, I'm not going to be worried about. I think they'll be fine. I think a lot of this is they're more focused towards what their offensive coordinator is going to basically be. Because you don't know if you're keeping Aaron Rodgers or you're letting him go. If you let him go, then you should most definitely get a quarterback. Even if you were to get the most talented player in the first round, go and get one in the second. Because a lot of rumors are buzzing. Kyle McCord, Jackson Dart, multiple other quarterbacks right now, as far as the Senior Bowl and in the Shrine Bowl, they are buzzing. This is why some of this stuff is important, because I like to see with where they are in the draft stock. But the Jets, I think, are in a pretty good position. Don't screw it up, is all they ask. So I think this will be a perfect opportunity for Steve Wilks. I've watched exactly his defensive scheme sets. I don't have a problem with it. I think this is the perfect destination for him to get his redemption. But you got to understand, if that defense, I'm just saying hypothetically, if this turned into a top 15 defense next season with Aaron Glenn and with Steve Wilks, I think you should honestly have a positive note on those two. You should. If that turns into a top 15 defense, that's where people really got to consider that, this was a perfect coaching hire, an alpha in the room, and then you get somebody who like Steve Wilks who can manage that defense and turn it into a top 15 defense. I mean, I watched Jim Harbaugh and his right-hand man, Jesse Minter, turn that bottom 5 defense in the last few years, turning into the number 1 scoring defense, and they were the top 10, top 15 defense. If they could do that, why can't the Jets? That's the only thing. It's interesting. So I just think the funny thing is, so the NBA, as we've talked about before in the past, the NBA is going through a crisis that not a lot of people are talking about. So there was a source that ended up happening. So the All-Star game's coming around the corner. And of course, lots of your big-time stars, they're all going to be there. But then they asked WNBA star Caitlin Clark to participate in their three-point contest. She said no. Because Caitlin Clark is seeing exactly what's happening with the NBA, and which is why the WNBA is in their prime. I mean, this is the thing. The WNBA is already in a prime setting because many of the women in college basketball are spending 4 years in college. They are building the product, which is why I think a lot of people were more interested in WNBA, and this is no joke. If you watch the viewership from WNBA last year, their numbers were a lot better than the NBA this year. And for people to basically say, oh, I'm never going to watch the NFL again. Okay, awesome. You know how much the viewership was with the Chiefs and the Bills? 57 million. Yeah, nice try. You're going to watch the NFL. I know why, because you ain't going to watch the NBA. Stop lying to yourself. The NBA right now goes through such a domestic crisis because there's not so many players that you can lean upon. And what's funny about it is, so the Nuggets were playing against the New York Knicks, and I'm going to tell you right now, I think the Knicks right now are primed to be the team that could go all the way. You don't hear a whole lot about the New York Knicks, but they are the classic example of what the NBA should have been. These are a bunch of Villanova guys, and New York is a big sports town. You go down there to Madison Square Garden, you walk around Manhattan, it's a big sports town. They love spending their money. But this is the focus. And the NBA's not listening to it. I think a lot of this is because with the G League in place, not to mention, it's more primed to being a shooter's league than it is of bringing back the hand checks, bringing back all the physicality. This is why the NBA is starting to slowly die off, if it isn't already quickly doing that. I'm disappointed in the NBA. But this is why NFL, college football, the WNBA, and even Major League Baseball, their viewerships are starting to go up better than the NBA's. And it's sad. Chase and I, we haven't even talked one lick about the NBA for quite a while. Now, when the NFL season probably shapes up and it's done, he probably would see me talk more hockey than I would have talked NBA because there's nothing to talk about. Because at this point, I'm watching the product of the league, and it is horrendous. I don't even know how they haven't already have already gotten this league on strike. This is horrible. And listen, in the WNBA draft, this is how sad it is. In the WNBA draft this past year, there were 7 impactful women that were going into that draft. How many in the NBA? There was only Zach Edey. There was only a couple guys I could even think of, but a lot of them are so international. They're going to this international pool, but you're not focusing on things on the domestic side. But that's why the NBA has such a crisis on their hands. And Adam Silver is already under fire with it. I mean, Cowherd kind of put him on the grill with it. Lots of people are putting Adam Silver on the grill. This is why that when you do not focus up on your product, this goes for everybody in business. If there's a problem in the product, find a way to adjust it or make it better. Maybe try a different ingredient. Maybe try a different financial method. That's going to guarantee you success. That's going to guarantee you all the best flavor. And people are going to love it. It's addicting. People are going to want to come into your store. They're going to want to come into your restaurant. They're going to want to come into your financial firm, and they want to learn, how do I become a billionaire? They want to learn that because it's a certain strategy. Adam Silver's strategy is failing. More international, that you don't even hear about these guys. They don't They're not walking in and doing commercial shoots. They're not going in there and doing all of these like cameo skit bits like Travis Kelce and the rest of the Chiefs are doing with movies and commercials. None of these international players are doing that, which is why it's so sad. It's sad to watch a league. When I grew up as a kid, okay, I remember when I got my first uniform, and it was a Kobe Bryant number 8 uniform. I was 4 years old, and I remember having that little, like, kid size, playable ball and hoop and everything else. And I, because we loved watching the three-peat of the Lakers dynasty. So it's like, that was the prime year of basketball. It was physical. It was in your face. And it was the kind that you had to drive to the basket. You had to be a monster in the perimeter, both offense and defense. We don't have that now. This is why the NBA needs to seriously consider everything that's happening in their product. Don't be so rigid. Okay? Make the change. Make it better. That's why Major League Baseball and a lot of these old heads, they're going to get over themselves. But Major League Baseball is making the changes that's going to make the viewership and the product even better. And as much as I harp on Rob Manfred, he's done a couple right things. I don't like the golden rule. I don't like the golden at bat rule. I think it's idiotic, but I like what he's done. Adam Silver needs to get on the same page. And by the way, if people are saying football soft, how? If we're talking about CTE and we're talking about player safety, don't call hockey soft, because I guarantee you a lot of those hockey players, especially them enforcers that still exist, they are not afraid to throw their gloves down on the ice and ready to kick your ass. That's literally what it is. So I don't want to hear any NBA player or anybody that's a fan of the NBA to think that the NFL is soft, let alone the NHL is soft, because you cannot, especially when you're not dealing with any physical play in the NBA, and you go in there and you think you're going to deal with a physical play in the NFL, grow up and give me a break. Your product's dying. This is why you got to get better at this. Take a page from Roger Goodell. Take a page from Gary Bettman. Take a page from Rob Manfred and get with the program. It's 2025. We're here to innovate, and we're here to do bigger and better things. So I do want to say this. I'm telling you, I think Steve Wilkes, this is why people, for whatever reason, he gets such a bad rap.
I don't like him as a DC. I truly don't think that he has been good since his days at Carolina. Well, and even then, it's kind of iffy because Sean McDermott was the one calling plays back then.
But was it his fault? And this is what goes back to this. Because, again, we watched that Super Bowl against San Francisco and the Chiefs. Was it his fault that the offense kept the defense on the field too long? Was it his fault that Dre Greenlaw, unfortunately, popped his leg and then all of a sudden he couldn't come out the field?
I mean, throughout his whole career, Steve Wilkes has only had a top 10 defense, I think, one time out of his whole defensive coordinator career. Like, he hasn't really had a top 10 defense more than once.
But I think learning it under Aaron Glenn, and again, Glenn has some of the adjustments that he needs to. But when I watched it in Detroit, and I get it, everybody talks about some of the corners that some of the corners are very, very good, and then there's some of them that get easily burnt. That's why they go and they have to take a flag. They have to do this and that, right? They got to hold. But the thing is I look at this as a transformation because, again, you don't want to take that defense for granted. I have too many very good pieces on that defense. I would not want to let it go below the 15 spots.
There's still so many better DCs out there than there is Steve Wilkes. I mean, why do you think the Niners let him go in favor of Robert Saleh? Because Robert Saleh is a better DC. Well, Steve Wilkes has not had a top 10 defense except once in his whole career. Well, and he's been a DC in the league like almost 10, 11 years?
Yeah, he's had prior experiences. But here's the thing. You let Steve Wilkes go. How did the defense look this year? I know injury prone. I get that.
Wasn't he their DC this year or no?
No, it was Sorensen. He was bad. That's why I said I just felt like he was put in a position, and I refer this back to Arizona. Okay, Arizona, with the Bidwells, they've never truthfully had a track record of successes in quite a long time, right? And because we've seen this team in the Super Bowl, they had a very terrific roster, and really, Kurt Warner, you got to give him credit for his age and to let everybody around him work the way they did. It was a very good team. But even in the Carson Palmer time, they made the playoffs, but they really didn't do much. They didn't really make a whole lot of noise. They make the playoffs with Kyler Murray, and they get their ass kicked by Aaron Donald in that first round. So all I'm saying is I'm like, maybe this is me. I'm a patient and an optimistic guy because I look at Aaron Glenn, defensive-minded coach, who's more of trying to be a culture setter, brings in a guy like Steve Wilks, and I feel like this is a redemption project. That's what I feel like, because if Aaron Glenn can shed some light, and I know that he's got a lot of experiences up on defense, then maybe it might actually transform Steve Wilks a little bit more. Because the thing is, look at what Sauce Gardner was when Robert Saleh was there, and look at what he was after he got fired. Not the same. That's why you got to get that defense working. So I'm saying give it a shot, give it a chance. If it don't work out, then there's other options. But if it does, there's a redemption. There's a redemption story.
Who is the Jets OC?
They haven't decided, and the only reason of it is because it's the deal with Aaron Rodgers. Do you keep him or do you let him go? If you let him go, then I think they might have a chance at yet another pretty good offensive coordinator. But it all decides on Aaron Rodgers' future. So that's the reason why they haven't gotten their OC yet. Which, again, I don't blame them. I would love to kind of – because, again, not every offensive coordinator, not every coach in this league could gel with a certain player. That's why, like with Aaron Rodgers, you saw exactly how everything unfolded. He got the coach fired. He got the GM fired. He started talking with the owner. I mean, I wouldn't want this in my building. Truthfully, I think he'd be good for one more year with a different team if you made that work. But
do you bring Mike McCarthy in as an OC?
I don't think so. In fact, Mike McCarthy, he actually already said that he's taking off his name on the coaching poll, and he's going to wait until 2026, which is smart. We'll talk a little bit more about that with Mike McCarthy, because you know what? This was the thing, but this is the thing. This is what Mike Vrabel did last year, and the Chargers loved him when they interviewed him, but Harbaugh got the job. No big deal. But even Vrabel had to kind of take a step back and evaluate and see what other coaching jobs were good. And this year, the hot commodity job was the Patriots job. You got Drake May. You got plenty of cap space. You got draft capital. I mean, that's a pretty good prime spot. And you already have like a very good defense that you can make it even better. So that's why it was a perfect match in heaven. So,
the most cap space in the NFL with $126 million.
Yeah. So we'll talk more about Mike McCarthy on this one because, again, I think this will interest you and it'll interest a lot of our audiences as well. I really think McCarthy's making the right move. I think
so. I think that there's a chance he could get another head coaching job next year. The one guy there's two guys I really want to see like get offers as like an OC or one guy as an OC, one guy as a head coach. The one guy I would love as an OC, and he's the OC for the Dolphins now, but he doesn't get a chance to call plays, and that's Frank Smith. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but Frank Smith is such a player-friendly coach. Like a lot of these guys in the NFL, and I did my research on him, a lot of the guys in the NFL love him. They said that he is a very, very,
well-respected guy.
Very well-respected guy, and there is so many players that like playing for him, and people have come to Miami to play with him. And I feel like he should get an actual shot at calling plays somewhere or get a chance at a head coaching interview. And then the second guy I think that deserves a head coaching interview next year would be Jesse Minter.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I agree. And here's the thing is that I think a lot of that is just Jim Harbaugh is just so smart because the fact of the matter is that's his right-hand man. So it's not like you're going to be a one-and-done coach and then you're going to take the reins on a team if you don't know like a certain situation, because again, not all situations are the same. You may be You may be New Orleans where you got to deal with all this cap space, right? You got to deal with that cap hell. And then you got to deal with, players that are old, existing, and they're hurt. And then you go to a perfect situation where you're like in New England. I got plenty of the Raiders, maybe. That's why the Pete Carroll hire is so intriguing, because I got all the cap space. I hit on a couple offensive lines that I don't even have to worry too heavily on. I could go get more. I've hit on 2 of them. Jackson Powers-Johnson. You got Colton Miller that's still there, and they got a right tackle that's very nice. So they've got some pieces from here. But that's the stuff that I'd like. Because here's the thing. I'm not going to work for any specific business. If you're a small business owner, right, do you at least have the mindset of innovation? If you don't, and you're just a small business person just trying to sell what you could to make a dollar, a dime, like $1 out of a dime, nice try. Because not a lot of people, because it's a dog-eat-dog town in the business world. You got to have the capital and the overhead. You got to be able to be smart, stable, and have a plan. That's why a lot of these other companies, they're so successful every year, because they're not so rigid. They're innovating. They're finding constant ways to be better. And their financials, they're not worried too heavily on it. Yes, they look at numbers, but they're not heavy on it. Like, they don't harp it like it's the Bible. So that's why they know those numbers will make itself. It's like here up on this show. I have a lot of people that subscribe. I have a lot of people that watch the show. And it's, and again, we meet our numbers. But that's because we constantly work on the quality. That's the thing. Yeah, you got to solve and you got to answer the people's questions in a small business. Because here's the thing. That's why I've always looked at reviews. In fact, my wife and I do it all the time. We go on Yelp and we watch reviews, because all I'm looking for are those 4 to 5 star victories. That's what I'm looking for. 1 star, something's wrong. Something's got to be fixed. That's the stuff. I mean, why do you think they're so critical about Dallas right now with the Brian Schottenheimer move?
Right. And like today it was funny because Cam Newton thinks that, they're going to tank because of the Brian Schottenheimer. He thinks that he's a one and done coach and that they're going to get the number 1 overall pick and get Arch Manning in there and then Dion next year. It's going to be a whole big thing. But back to what I was saying before, I do think that Jesse is going to have a lot of head coaching interviews next year with teams, because I'm just shocked he didn't even get 1 this year. Like, just not even 1.
I'm not. And the only reason of it is because this is in the making. You're baking this thing. You don't want to, like, again, this is not instant rice. This is not mashed potatoes. Let this thing cook a bit. That's why I
trust Jim Harbaugh. If he says that Jesse is going to be a good head coach, I'm trusting Jim.
Oh, yeah, that's why I'm trusting Jim too. That's why I'm saying he's so smart for this, because he knows that this is a slow cook build. Give it some time. Let this thing cook up, because here's the thing. Are you just going to throw a slab of steak up on the grill and then let it sit for 5 minutes and then you're like, okay, it's ready to eat? No, you'd be dealing with poisonous stuff. You'd be sick. Like, no, I'd let this thing cook, because I like the pink hue in the middle.
Ew.
I like medium rare. I like it because I like the juice. I just
savor medium rare.
I love to savor the flavor. This is why I'm such a foodie guy.
I'll go to medium well or medium, but that's about as bloody as I'll go. Like, well, I don't like it mooing at me, man. Come on.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, that's why you have seasonings. That's why you have seasonings. That's why you have certain spices. You got to kick it up a notch. You got to kick the flavor up good. Well, speaking of kicking up the flavor, I'll tell you what is heating up on the grill. Well, it's, of course, all the betting lines at BetUS currently going on right now. Super Bowl bets, NBA, NHL, college basketball, all that's going on. BetUS is busy in 2025, and we love that stuff. We love when it gets busy, because that means people are ready to bet and people are ready for my favorite month of March Madness. We're getting geared for that. So that's why you got to get up and you got to end up signing up with BetUS right now. BetUS has been doing this for over 30 years with their award-winning sportsbook and also one of their top-notch sports lines in the country. Okay? Parlay bets, leg bets, however you like it. BetUS has it up there for you every day of every week. And that's why you got to get up on top of it. I mean, there's plenty of contests and plenty of games to play it, and also plenty of opportunities for you to get your bets in and get yourself on the edge of the action. And at the same time, you sign up, you got the best account managers to make sure you get the best experience for BetUS yourself. That's a hell of a deal. You'll go online to BetUS.com right now. When you sign up, $50 or more into your deposits, and in the first 3 deposits, the more you deposit, there's a bonus of up to 125% that matches you up to $2,000, which means the more you deposit, the more chances that the money pot grows bigger and bigger when you sign up and you play in these daily contests all season long. Don't mess out on the opportunity for you to go and score big with BetUS. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or seek therapy in your respective state just to make sure that you don't gamble irresponsibly, because we want you to get the most out of BetUS the best way possible. Check it out for yourself. BetUS, where the game begins.
Looking for a show with the best takes and opinions? Want a show with the best coverage around the world of sports? Jam-packed with an all-star interview lineup? Then the best place to find it all, sports and entertainment, is right here. Join Jake Silva on the Snake Sports Talk Show, presented by SeatGeek and BetUS. Weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Snake Sports Talk Show is sponsored by Muscle Tech, with hundreds of supplements and vitamins to choose from, all packed with 100% all-natural proven ingredients. You can be sure that Muscle Tech will give you the edge and the boost to train and look like your fit and healthy best, whatever your goals are. Try Muscle Tech today and use promo code SNAKESPORTS to save 30% off your purchases.
So the New Orleans Saints, like we said, they are the front runners to potentially hire Kellen Moore by the time the season's over. So the thing about this is that the New Orleans Saints, we knew, was going to be a tough enough job only because you're dealing with the cap hell. And right now, you're watching this franchise that once Sean Payton came in and arrived and turned this organization around, gave the organization a Super Bowl, this has not been the same product post Sean Payton. And Sean is in Denver, and he only had to deal with the Russell Wilson contract. The two of them could not see eye to eye. And at the same time, you know, he made Russell work, 24 touchdowns, 8 picks. I mean, but the truth is, it wasn't particularly Sean Payton's guy. Now he has his guy in Bo Nix, who a lot of people feel outrageous about how Drake May got the Pro Bowl nod over Bo Nix. But there have been people that have said he's dealing with an injury, or some that say, well, he's just not participating. And look, there's a lot of quarterbacks that aren't. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. Because think about it. It's a lot to recover from playoff losses, especially with the performances that you put on. How many of you obviously were on Justin Herbert's case after 4 interceptions? How much of it were you on Lamar Jackson's case? Even with Mark Andrews with the drop catch, right? Were you on his case? And then Josh Allen, you were also up and on his case because he can't beat Mahomes. He's 0-4. It's not that simple here. But Sean Payton was able to make Russell Wilson work. And with Bo Nix, I'm excited for the future. I'm really excited for the future. But New Orleans, what future do they have? Since Sean Payton, they have not been the same team. When Dennis Allen was the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, he's winning 35% of the game. 35. And I knew for a fact I'm not hiring that coach. I'm not hiring. My biggest thing is that New Orleans has a cap problem. New Orleans has they have a lot of players who I like, but they got to take a page from Buffalo. They got to take a page from Tampa. They got to take a page from a couple other teams who moved off old existing contracts. Old existing contracts and that were injury liabilities. You got to move off them because you got to start to innovate. Not to mention, Derek Carr got hurt this season. They couldn't, even when they got the rookie quarterback, Spencer Rattler, they couldn't even do anything with it. And it's hard because you are dealing with an organization that's just building a deep well for themselves, which is why I thought Mike McCarthy, because he has dealt with some stuff, could have stabilized this organization. But I think because he went in there, evaluated, and then I think he came back and said, yeah, I'm not dealing with this. Why would I go from one dysfunction organization in Dallas to go to another dysfunctional organization in New Orleans? He pulled his name out the hat and basically said, you know what? I'll try again next year. I think Mike McCarthy made the right move because it was protecting himself as a coach. Because once you sign up on utter dysfunction, you got to deal with the entirety of the dysfunction, because the front office obviously is just a mess. They've already got it's like they've got 5 credit cards that they've signed up for that you don't know about, and they maxed out all of them. That's why you got to pay off the debts. You got to pay off the expensive luxury taxes that you're going to get hit with because of the amount of the cap. You don't have money. And the teams this is why the NFL is so good about being cap competitive, is because there are teams that are not afraid to move off players. They're not afraid to. They're also not afraid to cut them because they know that they're going to reload them in the draft. If you think about it, why all of you are so pissed that Kansas City is in it every single year is because they have a front office that's aggressive, even when they're winning. But they're going and taking players in the draft. They're going and signing guys in free agency. Hell, did you think that Philadelphia, do you honestly think they had a second thought about signing Saquon Barkley? No. The Giants did. And that's why the Giants are kind of kicking themselves in the back right now, because Philly's in the Super Bowl, and so is Saquon. They loaded their talent, but a lot of it is they got a lot of their front row talent out of Georgia. I mean, they trust the Georgia products. They love it. But this is why Philadelphia continues to be such a respected organization. They know how to be aggressive. The Rams, I know they lost Aaron Donald, but even they are aggressive. Kansas City's aggressive. But when you're the New Orleans Saints and you're trying to do a lot of these things, and then all of a sudden you extend Alvin Kamara, which you barely have any money. I don't know where that came from. And you're trying to, extend these guys. What are you doing? That is poor ran franchises. That's poor management. This is why I think if you put Kellen Moore up in there, let the young kid try to handle it, because I guarantee you Kellen's probably going to have a lot more hell than what you would have with Mike McCarthy, but that's the kind of stuff that'll stress you out. And you're better off to have a young kid go through it because they're young, they're energetic, and it probably will put a little bit of wear and tear. I'm not saying they're supermen, but they will deal with it, and they'll figure it out. You put an older veteran who's dealt with all that, I'm not dealing with this. I think of this as much as dating. Do I want a healthy type of relationship where the communication's great? We both click. We both are smart-minded people, know how to build an empire, and at the same time, we have the same touch. Or do I want to deal with drama that I know is a constant migraine? Does it get better? It probably doesn't when there's so much drama that's around it. You're kind of surrounded by it. And at the same time, no accountability, communication's off. I'm not dealing with that. I'm not going to go into it because in the end, I want a better future. I want to be healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally. And you want to have the same kind of treatment, especially when it comes to coaching. I'm not dealing with that hell. So let Kellen Moore coach it. But Mike McCarthy, he made the right move, taking his name out the hat. Chasing the news.
This is the Hot Press.
Mike Vrabel, several other coaches, they've done this. They took it off and said, okay, we're going to try and see if there's better job opportunities next year. And you know what? There's a few focuses before we move on to the news. From my takeaway, I'm looking at if this doesn't work with Mike McDaniel in Miami, I could see that work. I think because you got to get the organization on the same page. Because especially when you got Stephen Ross and you got Chris Greer. But I feel like both Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel, if they don't work it out, I think they both might be fired. It might be a 2-1.
Greer should be fired. Yeah, I agree.
It should be a 2-1 package. So there's Miami that could be an opening. I know Dallas, depending on it, they could be an opening, but I don't think McCarthy wants to go back. I think there's already a bridge burned there. So I don't blame him for that. It's hard to say with San Francisco. It's really hard to say. Because I still, I like Kyle Shanahan, but he is on the ticking time bomb.
If they don't make the playoffs again next year, I see him gone. I do see, Mike McDaniel gone. But yeah, as far as New Orleans Saints goes, they've already had an interview with Mike Kafka. They've had an interview with a few others. If they wanted Mike Kafka, they would have hired him by now. I really do think that they are waiting for Kellen Moore. And like you said, if they are going to put Kellen Moore in this horrendous situation, give him a long leash. Give him 4 to 5 years to be a part of this team. Do not cut him after 2 bad seasons or even 3 bad seasons, because it is the roster that is going to be his downfall. It is not going to be his ability to coach players.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why the ownership and the front offices, they got to get with the program. They can't do that. They're going to struggle. And that's why they find themselves in this predicament. So you got to do the right thing. That's why like McCarthy, at least McCarthy walked in, evaluated, and then he came out and said, yeah, no, take my name out the hat. but again, I don't blame him. I mean, because again, every year there are 7 to 8 coaching jobs that open up in the NFL because money is getting bigger. The timing is now starting to get a little bit more strained. So there's not a whole lot of time.
And with Kellen, you don't get very many coaching interviews and everything. You don't get very many interviews or very many people that want a second interview with you. Take a job while you got it. I mean, this might be his only chance to be a head coach, unless we see how good he does. If he comes in, turns the Saints around, they finish 9-8 or 10-7 next year. Well, people are going to start looking at him differently.
Well, that's why, and real quickly, this is why I trust Pete Carroll with the Raiders. Experience, knows exactly, he's a very good recruiter. That's why I was very surprised when Lincoln Riley wouldn't even knock on his door when he was teaching at USC to at least get some pointers, at least to be able to recruit in his region. Because a lot of those kids, they're going to Big 10 SEC schools. A lot of those kids. Either that or they're going to the Big 10, the Big 12. So I know Pete Carroll will turn this thing around. The question,
I agree.
And I know Mike Vrabel will make the Patriots much better than the past year. That's why I think they're capable of winning more than 8-9 games next year, because I could see the quality of the defense. I could see them working on a bunch of important spots like the offensive line and the weapons. They're going to work that puppy. I could trust Mike Vrabel on that. But the question marks I have is Ben Johnson in Chicago. That's my question mark. I trust he will get the offense rolling. But again, it's all a matter of he's got to build consistency there. That's the most important thing for Chicago. Jacksonville with Liam Cohen, again, aside from the cringy response, which everybody's freaking out about, I just got to see a better version of Trevor Lawrence. I do
too.
And the other thing is even when I look at Aaron Glenn, I think this could work for the Jets. So that's why with Kellen Moore, and this is kind of true, not all coaching spots could be guaranteed to be great coaching spots. Sometimes you may have to put in a little bit more elbow grease. But a lot of that is that there's coaching spots that you're smart enough, like the Vrabels, the Carrolls, the Aaron Glenns. They patiently waited on, they outwaited, and they basically said, okay, get me here. But then there are also other coaching destinations that are looking for these coordinators. But then what are they doing on the front office end? That's why I'm looking at Chicago and I'm looking at New Orleans. Because they've got stuff they got to fix. Jacksonville, I mean, the cons are weird, but if Liam Cohen can get the best out of Trevor Lawrence, then they'll be fine. They'll be very, very good.
I think so too. Now let's get into some news here. I know that the Toronto Blue Jays have been looking for some pitching this offseason. They were the front runners to land the Roki Sasaki player, and he was about to sign the contract before he just decommitted and went to the Dodgers. And now today's news, they just signed Max Scherzer to a 3-year deal.
Yeah, Mad Max in the 6.
He's got 4 rings and everything. He's been a good, solid starting pitcher in this league, been very consistent. I think he's got 2 Cy Young awards, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
if he's the same Mad Max of old, the Blue Jays got a good starting pitcher here.
I think what was smart about the Toronto Blue Jays is now they get their 1-2 punch guys. Because if you think about it, Jose Barrios is still the starter. You now add in Max Scherzer from here. So you've got 1 and 2 very good right-handed arms right there upon the rotation. Now, I think offensively they could be much better this year because you got Anthony Santander on that lineup. And the question mark now becomes, what does the future hold with both Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette? I'll be honest with you. I think Bichette will be the first one leaving. And the only reason of it is because I just think there's been parts of Bo Bichette's game. I don't question his defense. I just question his offense. There's been times where it's been a little bit streaky. But I know he's a very good player. I know he could get the job done. But Toronto, they want to be competitive in this thing because the Tampa Bay Rays got gutted all throughout the season. The Seattle Mariners, there's just such oddity with them after, a couple years ago where they made the playoffs. They won a playoff series, and then all of a sudden they met the Astros, and then after that they didn't even capitalize. They didn't capitalize with any moves. And then you've got because the Orioles, the Yankees, the Red Sox are the 3 teams that got some players that I think could be better. But that's why the Toronto Blue Jays, they don't want to be the oddballs in the AL East. So I think this was actually a pretty good move. I know the Roki Sasaki deal, whatever, but at least you actually got a secondary plan and getting a second punch in this rotation with Barrios at the front.
Yeah, I agree. That's an up-and-coming offense and everything. There's still a guy like Pete Alonso that's still a free agent that you could go out and add to the lineup too if you decide you want another power hitter to the lineup, along with Vlad Guerrero and everything. So it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up going. I know that there's been at least 7 teams in talks with Pete Alonso, the Diamondbacks, the Padres, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the A's, the Rockies, and there's been 1 or 2 more that have all been in contact with him. So it's a matter of who's going to offer him more money and where's he going to sign. And we'll be here to break down that news when it comes out. So now we've got the Houston Texans are looking for their offensive coordinator after they fired Bobby Slowick. Yep. It's looking more and more like Chip Kelly is staying with Ohio State So they have had interviews with 4 different guys. Johnson, their QB coach,
Johnson,
Gerard Johnson. They've had interviews with Clay Kubiak, Clint's younger brother. They've had interviews with Eric Bieniemy, and they've also had an interview with Brian Johnson, the former Eagles OC. I think out of all of those, to fit best with CJ Stroud and that Houston Texans offense, I think Eric Bieniemy would be a home run shot.
I agree, no question, that I think Bieniemy would be a very, very good pickup for this.
And he's been calling a lot of teams asking for, a job now that he's out.
Because, this is the thing, is that we all knew what UCLA's program was honestly going to turn into, and it was a disaster. But that's because UCLA, they, like USC, the Southern California area, all these kids, they're all going out to a lot of those big-time schools. They're going to a lot of those big-time conference programs. I mean, it's just the reality, but this is why you've got to aggressively recruit. You've got to be able to do it. But I think with Bieniemy and this offensive scheme for C.J. Stroud, I think it would work because I got Joe Mixon, I got Nico Collins that I could put together in a package. Now, the question mark is, which is interesting, is with as far as their receivers go, because from what I've heard, there's been no news surrounding Stephon Diggs at this moment yet, because there has been some rumors. Potentially, the Giants could be interested if the two sides could not come to a deal, which is, it is what it is. But Tank Dell with the horrendous leg injury, John Mechie, there's going to be a part of it. I think Houston is probably going to end up looking somewhere for at least another receiver to be on the safe side, because I love Tank Dell. But the injuries like that, all on the lower body, is going to slow him down, which is why I think if you get to that point, I think Eric Bieniemy, because if you've seen a lot of the packages he's put together, right? Another person who I think would be a very good offensive coordinator would be Anthony Lynn. I've watched him with, the run game sets. I've watched him with, how he's put together offensive packages, and it's very impressive. It's actually really good. That's why.
Isn't he on the Chargers?
No, he's not. No.
I thought he was their run game coordinator.
No. He was Washington's run game coordinator.
That's right.
Washington. Now, he was the head coach of the Chargers at the past.
Yeah.
I've said it before. I felt like it was an unfair shot. They kind of didn't give Anthony Lynn that chance but think about it. Who was his offensive coordinator? Shane Steichen. So they were able to get the offense rolling where they were the 7th best offense in the league at one point as Herbert is a rookie. So Eric Bieniemy, though, with the connection and relationship he's had with Patrick Mahomes and with Andy Reid, C.J. Stroud, the other thing is because we've watched Stroud. How many times was he stiff in the pocket and had to throw with his arm, right? I think if you bring in Bieniemy, you're going to mix in some packages where you might actually get C.J. Stroud out the pocket more. You might get him to get a little bit more mobile, open the spaces up. I think there's definitely a package deal on offensive schemes that is really going to be beneficial for C.J. Stroud, Joe Mixon, and a bunch of really good offensive pieces. Because, again, I'm thinking about this O-line. So if you bring in a guy like Bieniemy, I guarantee you that's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, I agree. And we have seen how the Bears hired the former Broncos pass game coordinator as their new OC. And, you got a lot of choices out there of guys who you could pick as your OC. I know that Chad O'Shea, the wide receivers coach for the Browns, has called plays in the past. He could be a name to look out for. Just in case. And then you've got, the Rams OC, who has called plays in some preseason games for the Rams, who could be looking for a shot. Because I know their QB coach, Zach Robinson, went to Atlanta to call plays there. So there's quite a few names to look out for. A lot of these young guys need a shot in the NFL to call plays after being offensive assistants and QB coaches. So look for that to happen. In other news, Mikko Rantanen, in first game with the Canes, and he scored tonight.
Oh, yeah, he did. Well, here's the thing. You knew that he was going to be an offensive machine. which is why I said with Carolina, this is a coin flip type of trade deal. Because if Mikko Rantanen, this is what a lot of hockey guys were talking about here early on. I was listening to a lot of trustworthy sources and some trustworthy guys, very optimistic. But they were saying this, and there was a quote, is that if Mikko Rantanen does not sign an extension with the Carolina Hurricanes, then who does that benefit more? Colorado. Because they got out of a potential situation to where Mikko wanted a contract like Nathan McKinnon. And that's why Colorado was like, no, we can't do it. Because it would be expensive. Now you're dealing with two forwards on massive contracts with a player who's still on the LTIR and Gabriel Landeskog. That would have been a cluster. I did not like that at one point. But that's why Colorado got out of this business. And now the middleman, of course, was Chicago getting their third-round pick back. But getting rid of some of the contract retention was one thing. But Chicago, I don't know what moves they got brewing up, but I just think that if he doesn't sign a contract extension with the Hurricanes, expect Colorado to literally win this thing. With the fact that they're getting Mitchus, and they've also got a very good face-off forward, and they got picks. So I think Colorado would be in the right direction. But I will tell you, though, come the trade deadline, expect Colorado to come in heavy on defense. Dude, that defense is atrocious right now with Colorado. They're capable of scoring offenses. That's not their problem. But that defense, when you got your back turned, it's not good. Like Calvin DeHaan, he is very much regressed. There is a bunch of players right now that are either hurt or they're just on the regression. And I expect Colorado to literally put their chips in on defense in the trade deadline.
Yeah, no, I look for them to have that too. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? The last bit of news that I got is a kind of an important one, and with the legal aspects of it, I don't think you can legally, in terms of how it is for the NFL policy, I don't think that you can do this until the Super Bowl is over with or until after free agency. I'm not 100% sure. But there are a lot of reports right now that the New Orleans Saints and the Las Vegas Raiders have called the Cleveland Browns to acquire that second overall pick and see how much it would cost for them to get it. Because I know that Tom Brady and Pete Carroll are heavily looking at a young quarterback, Shador or Cam. Oh, yeah. And if they can get their guy of the future, they are willing to give up some draft capital for it.
So I think last time we did the top 10 picks, where were the Raiders? They were 6th, right?
They were 6th.
So 6-2. To me personally, because again, I think the answer is Shador Sanders. That has been clear from the get-go because him and Tom Brady, they've been like this. They've been talking, texting, they've been keeping up with each other. I feel like that's the done deal. Now, that's some spicy stuff because here's the thing. This is why I cannot wait for the offseason. I really can't. Because there's going to be so many moves up out there that the Raiders are a team to keep my eye on because it's going to come down to draft implication. It's also going to come down to free agency market, who they retain, who they go and sign. So by the way, did you hear that they retained Patrick Graham? They're bringing him back. So now, and that's what I think is an interesting thing is because I think Patrick Graham, he went through the stuff with Antonio Pierce, which was not a bad thing. But I think Pete Carroll saw something in at least his play calling that I think he's willing to get him back to really kind of reshape and refine his coaching set, which I like it. I mean, Patrick Graham is not that terrible either. I just think that there's a little bit of some tweaks he's got to do. But at least he's going to be arguably with one of the best teachers on defense. That's why I think it'll work. But besides that, I think, again, it's clear it's going to be Shador Sanders to the Raiders because they're going to get offensive line. They're going to go get weapons. They're going to go and get a lot of this.
I've been hearing that that they might give up their second-round pick this year and we would swap them the 2nd and 6th, and then they would give up their first rounder for 2026 and everything. I'll take that in a heartbeat. We draft Abdul Carter at 6 there, never look back.
By the way, Abdul Carter, I'm hearing a lot of buzzes that he's right now the best player in the draft. He's already being ranked as number 1 to go off the board.
I mean, if he goes to the Titans and everything, that means Travis Hunter is going to go to the Patriots. That means Will Johnson is going to go to the Jags, and then that leaves us with Mason Graham or one of the left tackles and everything if we want to go that route.
Isn't that crazy? I couldn't even believe that it turned around that fast. But I guess that tells you a lot about the quarterback market. Because if this was, and it's funny because Peter Schrager even came out and said this, that if this was a fantastic quarterback market, then guys like Tenero and McMillan, Abdul Carter, and a bunch of others would not get so much buzz if it was a big quarterback market. But because it's not, Abdul Carter absolutely is the big-time commodity right now to be the best player out the draft.
I mean, who knows how it's going to be? I could definitely see Travis Hunter the first off the board, and if Abdul Carter's off the board first, you get the Raiders trading with the Browns. Yep. They take Shedeur Sanders. The Giants will get Cam Ward. Yep. Now it's going to, if Abdul Carter's first and everything, you're going to have, or if it's Travis Hunter that's first and everything, you're going to be looking at the New England Patriots as like, okay, do we go with an offensive lineman here to protect our quarterback? Do we go with an offensive weapon? Do we go with Will Johnson to pair with, Gonzalez? Or do we sit here and draft Abdul Carter if Travis Hunter's first off the board? It's going to be very interesting to see how the first 6 picks of the draft are going to play out here, because I know for a fact that if the Browns trade back to 6, they've got 3 options that are available. Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, or Calvin Banks are the 3 guys that I would be looking for on my list.
So a quick thought. When was the last time that New England ever took an offensive wide receiver? At least
that would be the 2021 draft, or the 2019 draft, where it was N'Keal Harry, the 32nd pick overall.
How did that work? Not so good. This is why it was so important for them to get somebody as the senior player personnel, because you got to get some weapons on this roster right now. But
yeah.
That's why.
I mean, what are the odds that we even see Ashton Genty go to the Patriots at 4?
Well, I mean, do they truly need a running back if they got Ramondre Stevenson? I could see them taking a guy late.
Pairing him with Ramondre Stevenson, an offensive weapon and everything. I mean, look how much Saquon Barkley's changed the Eagles and everything.
You know who I can see go to New England? That kid from Iowa, Neal. I could see him going there. And that's a pretty good tandem right there with Ramondre, and then you bring in Neal from Iowa.
You mean Kansas, Devin Neal?
Yeah, Devin Neal. Yeah, Devin Neal. Oh, God, he looks really, really nice.
Yeah, from Kansas. Oh, my gosh.
That's what I'm saying. I think he'd be great. I think he'd be a great player on this tandem. So.
Yeah, but it's right now. It's the front runners are the Raiders and Saints to be trading with Cleveland. If I'm if I'm gonna trade with the Saints, I want 2 first rounders, because I'm not going all the way back to pick number 10 if I'm not going to get any compensation for that.
But to be truthful for you, I don't think they're going to, because they need a lot of capital. Why would I get rid of capital if I'm trying to shed off a lot of money? That's the problem. So I don't see New Orleans. I think the Raiders, yes, because they got plenty of capital. They're in a very comfortable spot. So, yeah. And like I said, I think it's clear-coded. I think Shedeur's their guy. And I think they'll be willing to give up some of that capital. And by the way, both teams aren't losing anything. I think it's more of draft implications, and then they're basically they're planning out their future. That's what this is. So
I mean, if the Browns get the Raiders 2026 first round pick, and then we get a second round pick for this year, cool. We get the first pick in the second round, and then we get the Raiders pick, which is like the 4th pick in the second round. Like, I'll definitely take it. And then we get a chance to use the Raiders first round pick next year and ours to trade up and get a quarterback. Like, I would love that.
Yeah. No, I would too.
I look for this news to break probably after the free agency hits and everything. I think the Raiders are going to try to trade heavy with the Browns because there's been a lot of reports on it so far. So we'll see.
We shall see indeed. Chase Smith news.
This is the hot press.
So I started kind of thinking about something here, and so the Atlanta Falcons, because last year they went in with the plan, and a lot of this is a copycat league. Everybody's trying to copy what the Kansas City Chiefs, what a lot of other teams are doing. Okay, that's kind of what it is. That's the identity. The Atlanta Falcons, last year, they obviously went and got their veteran quarterback, which I do not hinder that on. I think they made the right idea by going and getting a veteran quarterback because at least you have somebody who's obviously capable of playing in the now. And then they go draft Michael Penix, which everyone looked sideways at the pick at the first initial reaction. But then it turned out it worked. Expect what the Atlanta Falcons could potentially do this offseason and in the draft. Because the one thing that I thought they figured out was the edge rushing position. Because once they went and got the edge rusher from the Patriots, I thought once they got Matt Judon, I thought it was great. They got their guy. And then they go and get Justin Simmons. But then all of a sudden, it's like Atlanta they turned sideways. But the one positive that I took it away from Atlanta is at least I got a chance to see what Michael Penix looks like. Michael Penix looks NFL ready. That's it. That's my perspective. And again, I know the Kirk Cousins situation looks pretty alarming to some people because you're paying all that guaranteed money and he's sitting on the bench and he's willing to do that. I'd still say Kirk Cousins may be on the move. But to me, again, 65% of teams in this league often whiff at quarterback. It happens. It's the hardest position in football to fill in. But at least with the Atlanta Falcons, they found their future in Michael Penix. I think he's NFL ready. Now, the question is, what do you do about Kyle Pitts? Because since his rookie season where he had 1,000 receiving yards, what has he truthfully produced? Some of that may be because the play calling hasn't quite matched the package of how to utilize him, that how they did in Florida, because he was such a hot commodity coming out of the University of Florida. And then all of a sudden, it's like it took a downward spiral. So do you keep him in terms of let's see how he connects and gels with Michael Penix? Or do you put in a trade package to move him and maybe potentially go and get a different tight end? Because I'm telling you right now, I know a couple people that are out there in Mobile, Alabama right now who did a lot of interviews. One of them did an interview with Harold Fannin. They've done interviews with a bunch of other tight ends. Does Atlanta make that case for it? I think there should be at least a thought about what Zach Robinson and the rest of that offense is trying to put together around Michael Penix. Because Drake London, he's a very good receiver. He had a pretty good year. Not to mention Darnell Mooney, how good has he been? That's why I think if you put together some very good packages, Atlanta will turn this around. Because you're only dealing with Tampa Bay, who lost Dave Canales a year ago to go to Carolina and fix up Bryce Young. And man, do they look good. And then you lose Liam Cohen to Jacksonville. What does Tampa Bay then look like after that? New Orleans looks like a dumpster fire. And Carolina, it could be on the come up. So if you're Atlanta, you got to do something here. I mean, but that's what I'm saying. I truthfully believe that if I'm on the side, I'm 50-50 with Kyle Pitts. If you keep him on this roster, then hopefully you put together some packages for him and Michael Penix to connect. Or if you move him, then I'm looking at somebody like a Harold Fannin, somebody like that late in the draft.
Mason Taylor.
You know what? I watched Mason Taylor's videos. Wow. He's a pretty good option. But but this is the other thing. He's a pretty big size tight end.
He's a great blocking tight end too.
Does that work for a scheme that Zach Robinson? I know Zach Robinson had I know he had Tyler Higbee in his offensive play scheme when he was in LA. But does Mason Taylor maybe potentially work in Atlanta?
I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, you got a big guy that can catch the ball, one that can also run block and stuff as well when you need him to for Bijan. You know, he's a dual threat, and he's not the fastest, but like his big body and everything, like he could be a nice safety blanket for Michael Penix.
Yeah, I agree. And again, the draft note that was on Kyle Pitts was he was the most athletic tight end. That was what we got out of the draft implication, is he was more athletic, a guy that could be an offensive machine. But you got to think about it. I mean, when we watch those games in University of Florida, look at the scheme set they were put together. It looked more spread. But is that the kind of offense that he runs? That's why I'm like, in my opinion, because it's so top heavy on tight ends, I'd say you honestly just move it to get assets and maybe go and get a tight end in this draft. If I'm Atlanta, that's what I would do, because
another weapon, period.
Another weapon as well. I just truthfully, like, I since his rookie year, I've just seen this thing. And look, it's not his fault that they've changed a lot of quarterbacks. I get it. That's not easy to deal with. Okay, you had to deal with Desmond Ridder. You had to deal with Marcus Mariota. You had to deal with Kirk Cousins and deal with Michael Penix. It's not easy. But you got to put him around an offense where he could produce. That's why I think if you cut your losses and you go and get draft capital and you go draft the next receiver or the next tight end, then you'll put in another really good offensive package for Michael Penix. Because I just look for at least the best case scenario possible, because Tampa has already won the division back-to-back. Carolina and Bryce Young, they look better. I don't want to come in mediocre because one position is not quite filling in the hole on offense. I got to get everybody to work.
Yep.
So
I agree.
That's why I'm like, I think it's an interesting thought. So I think this is I'm watching this. Watching the Shrine Bowl and watching the Senior Bowl. This is why I get like my scouting glasses on. Like, I love to be in the eyes of the scouts.
Have you seen what Mike Green's been doing?
Oh, man. He's already being talked about. And this is funny because I've heard this from Los Angeles radio. And they're already starting to think, keep your eyes on the Chargers if they look at someone like Mike Green. They say he
bull rushed Josh Connerly, who was supposed to be one of the better tackles in the league.
And you know what? You don't get those a whole lot, right? Like, you have your Abdul Carters, you have your edge rushers. Hell, that guy from Georgia. But this kid out of Marshall, hey, you find this is why when people are like, oh, I don't pay attention to this stuff, I hardly ever see it. How come? This is part of where your future begins. That's why, to me, and I have a lot of respectful people I've kept up, I've texted, and I've asked. I'm like, what do you know that I got to get in on? What do I need to know? And they're out there. I mean, they're out there doing the interviews. They're out there watching film. They're out there watching the practices.
This is how Rashawn Slater became a first-round pick.
Oh, yeah.
From this game.
Yeah, and look at some of these other players that their draft stocks rose up rather than
Tez Johnson.
Yeah, Tez Johnson right now, unguardable. That's the part where I look at Tez Johnson. And even if I look at Teteroa McMillan, who's arguably one of the number one receivers in this draft, right? And then you look at, the Travis Hunters, you look at the Luther Burdens. But if you got somebody like Tez Johnson available, watch him be such a steal. There's such a thing as projected draft spots, and then there's busts, but then there's also the steals of the draft. I've seen so many of them. I remember saying that Jonathan Taylor, when he went to the Indianapolis Colts out of Wisconsin, what a steal in the draft Chris Ballard did. Such a steal. I've watched, this past season, Ladd McConkey go to the Chargers. What a steal it was for them. I mean, there is such a thing with this. But I just am like, it's crazy. It's crazy how a lot of this, because this is where we do our homework. This is how you and I put together a top 10 list, and then we put together our full 32 draft list. This is how it's done. So somebody commented, Connor Lee is a guy that transitioned from running back and needs to add strength and weight, but it is still impressive. I like Izira Raku, Shamar Stewart, and a number of other edges that were
Connor Lee, the right tackle for Oregon. He was a running back at one point.
I guess so. That was insane.
I'm gonna have to look that up because I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, it's crazy. But
dang.
Yeah, what a transition.
That is Raku. I heard about him and everything. Like he's starting to show a lot of potential, and like he's been lighting it up. In terms of that.
Who would be attracted to somebody like Izaraku in at least in the middle of the pack of the draft? Probably
Steelers.
Steelers would be on top of that because they're defensive friendly. I could see
the Rams.
I could see the Rams, yeah, because you want to pair somebody up right there with Jared.
The Niners.
Yep, the Niners would be another one, even if they got to get rid of a lot of those old existing contracts, even on their side.
I would love Cleveland to do it, but I don't see it happening. Another guy that is climbing up the draft boards with how dominant he has been in the Pro Bowl or Senior Bowl practices, that's Gray Zabel at NDSU.
I've heard Gray Zabel's name.
Gray Zabel is an offensive tackle. I think he played left tackle at North Dakota State, but they put him in guard, or they put him inside at guard and center, and he's gone up against some of the best talent. Mike Green, Sharon Stewart, the defensive tackle. They've gone up against Georgia guys and everything, and he has lit them up and stopped them in their tracks. Cold.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I've heard his name get thrown around a lot, and I like with what I see. So there's a lot. There's a lot to really look at.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch the Senior Bowl and everything, guys that stick out and everything, write them down and give you my top 10 list on, top performers, who I think draft stock is rising or falling, who I think is going to, sneak into the first round and everything like that. It's going to be a lot of guys. There's a lot of people at the Senior Bowl. Like I can name at least 10 picks from the Senior Bowl that have gotten that have made their draft stock rise to the late first round because of how good they perform.
Oh, looks like he transitioned to O-line sophomore year of high school.
Okay. That explains it. That makes more sense.
But you know what, though? What I like about that is at least I like a guy who's got very good feet. Because remember, you watch off a lot of these offensive linemen, right? And the ones I look at are the ones that are able to stay straight, balanced, and they've got great feet work. It's not only just the utilization of the hands. Yes, you still got to be able to push and resist. But at the same time, your feet work at least catches these edge rushers off guard. I mean,
but to still get bull rushed by Mike Green, that's insane.
But think about that. That's the funny part. It's like at last year's draft where the Chargers knew they needed to take the best offensive tackle in the country in Joe Alt. Because that was not a pick you wanted to pass up. Guy's got great feet. Guy's got great hands. And that's why with both him and Slater on both sides, it's unstoppable. But that's why they got to work the interiors.
Unless you got a guy like Myles Garrett going up against Joe Alt.
Only the one and only guy who was able to just get a 6'9" tackle off his feet. And yet
he freaking lifted him up.
Why? He lifted him up and still got the sack. Was just that was an incredible game. I mean, in the end, I was just like, Myles Garrett is just one of one. That's why you look at a lot of these players when we go into like the Senior Bowls and the Shrine Bowl. Like these guys could potentially either be one of ones or they'll be somebody that'll be a household name in some of these franchises.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, man, we got a lot really done today. And we only got one more show tomorrow until we got to end up, watching throughout, the Senior Bowl this weekend. And then we got to get ourselves ready for Super Bowl week. This is going to be nuts. But we got to get ourselves prepared. Thanks for everybody stopping by on the Snake Sports Talk Show. We appreciate all of your guys' love and support. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Keep yourselves up to date on future and past episodes wherever you get your podcast. And we'll be here. We'll be here just before the Senior Bowl this weekend. It's going to be very enjoyable. And then we will be here during the week of Super Bowl. So you do not want to end up missing our episodes as well. We're getting geared up for that. With Jake Silva and Chase Steffes, see y'all later, guys, and we'll see you guys tomorrow night on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, everyone.
Tomorrow night.